Hello, and welcome to Cursed Kingdom in another episode, only this time it's a bit different. This week is the first Halloween special. I hope you enjoy as we explore the possibility of ghosts. Are they real? Could they truly exist? What happens when we die? And before we begin, may I state that the amount of creepy activity that occurred while trying to record this episode has been unreal. And I'm so excited to share it with you all and get your opinions. So please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you have any opinions especially, I would love to hear them in the comment section, so do comment them. Now let us begin by welcoming author Daniel Oliver Thomas. Greetings to you, Daniel Thomas. From all of the undead here, you didn't run into too many restless ghosts on your way into the land of the damned, did you?
No, it's been quite present. The headless chauffeur has been very kind to drive me around the kingdom. It's been quite wonderful. I do think you have a necromancer problem, but I'm sure we could sort that out with a little bit of magic.
Maybe. We'll have to find out, though. It seems everyone who comes here has a very pleasant stay, but me. Maybe it's because I'm the one trapped here. It's all a novelty for you lot. Well, I guess the best place to start is by asking for you to tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do?
So I'm an urban fantasy author, writing for Athon Books at the moment. My first book, Born of the Shades, came out a week ago, I believe. And I've got another one, Into the Shade, coming out on the 8th of October. It is October this month, isn't it?
Yeah, it
yes,
is.
It is. Sorry. So mostly I just write. When I'm not writing, I work in a supermarket or I do plastering jobs on the side. That's me in a nutshell.
So, why did you start writing? Any reason in particular?
I always kind of had the tendency to daydream. I'd just come up with silly little things in my head, or maybe a game I was playing or a TV show I was watching. When it's finished, I'd think what happened next, and I'd think about those kind of things. And then I ended up with a friend talking about making a graphic novel. So I wrote up some scripts and he was supposed to do the art, and he never actually did the art. And I had all these scripts for a graphic novel. And I turned those scripts into the first draft of a book, which was absolutely awful. But that was where my journey basically began.
Interesting.
I just had this need to create a story.
Sort of like all the scripts upon my laptop that will never ever see the light of day.
Yeah, we're definitely in the same boat there. I don't think I'll ever release those scripts.
Yeah, I have so many scripts for short films, TV series, radio scripts, and they will never see the light of day because I can't be bothered. I'm going to put it bluntly, I just can't be bothered. So, where do you find your inspiration? What drives your creativity?
I just have this need to make something. Just this need to kind of have a story out there that I've done. Just to have people read it and say that was done by this person. It's just something I've kind of hope that one day someone will look back and say he did something good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's sort of like leaving a legacy behind.
That's really my motivation. Yeah, it's to leave a mark on the world in some small way before I disappear into obscurity.
Yeah, it does make sense. I think quite a few writers have felt that throughout their lives. I know I definitely have. I think that was the motivation for me to publish my first ever book. God, I regret that. Teen fiction romance. Oh.
That's a good seller, though.
It was at the time, but I hate the fact that I wrote it now. I will never write under the same name again. Just out of embarrassment. At least you didn't do that, though.
No, it's true. I am writing something I'm very passionate about. No, I'd only ever be able to write something that I know that I will always want under my own name, kind of thing.
So how long has it taken you to write each book?
Well, it's taking less and less time as I progress. I started 6 or 7 years ago, and the first book, which is the shortest of the 3 that are being released, took me 5 years. The second book took me a year, and then the third book took me a year. So yeah, it was 6 years I was writing, if my maths is right there. I'm absolutely terrible at maths. I'm pretty sure I just did 7 there, didn't I? But yeah, took me a very long time, because the first book I was teaching myself how to write and how to get everything right. And I had some help through a couple of people I know, a couple of people that know how to do this, and I managed to figure it out now, I think, so it's not taking me as long.
Well, just tell us all that your first draft at least had a beginning, middle, and end.
No, not at all. Oh my gosh, my first draft was just scenes all over the place, and none of it made any real sense. I showed it to someone, they said, you need to structure this, and I was like, how the hell do I do that? And I managed to string it together, and it worked.
You went against Todorov.
I didn't know what I was doing before, but I figured it out in the end.
So are you now on the side of the light with Todorov and Joseph Campbell and all the sane people? Please say you're on that side now.
And I am a complete linear writer now, so I know where it's going, and I know that what chapter needs to flow into the next.
Yeah.
So it's very structured now.
So, seeing as you taught yourself how to write, what difficulties have you faced when writing?
Procrastination is probably the biggest difficulty I face. I'll sometimes go a good month without even going anywhere near my office, just because I let things get in the way. But then there's also, I have like a lot of anxiety issues when it comes to writing. So if I write a chapter I'm really proud of, I will panic and think that I can't write a chapter better than that ever again, and that I don't deserve to be a writer because I can't think of anything better than that. And then I'll just not even think about writing for a while. So those are my struggles when it comes to writing, I'd say.
Well, at least now you can tell yourself that you do deserve to be a writer, seeing as you've been published.
Yeah, you'd think that'd help, but...
It never does.
The fear is always going to be there, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm guessing the anxiety will eventually kind of lighten up a bit, though, as you kind of get more experience in the writing world. I
hope so. I do.
However, anxiety is also the writer's curse. Among other things, there's a lot of curses to being a writer, just to warn you.
Yes.
So,
writers now as well.
What can you tell us about your creative process?
So I think about things for days, just kind of live within my mind while I'm doing chores and while I'm at work to my head, and just live in the world that I'm figure out plot points and what this character is going to behave, or things affected them, and that I'll plan out what I'm going to write, and then I'll sit pants my way through it.
I'm sorry to tell you this, but it kind of broke up a lot just then.
Oh no.
Could you please repeat that?
That's fine. Then.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was all alone then. Thought you'd left me.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
So, what can you tell us about your creative process?
Okay, so I have things in my head, and I'll just kind of escape into while I'm at work or while I'm at home doing, and gritty of what I'm going to do next in the book. Character developments or plot developments, and I'll really vibe with these characters that are almost like people to me now. They're like friends, I'd say.
They are. They're just the friends in your head.
Sit down in my office. They are. That won't shut up. And I'll pants my way through it. Usually sitting under a purple light because someone told me that. And then I'll attack the keys and hope for the best.
Yeah. Though I've never heard about the purple light before.
Yeah. So colours can affect you in a certain way. Makes you calm, red makes you anxious or angry or whatever it is. And purple is supposed to make you more sensitive.
See, I understood about the creativity from when I did my university degree. Like, colours can influence when it comes to advertisements. Like green can show healthy foods and make you think of salad. Oranges make you think of warm cooked foods and stuff like that, like a Sunday roast dinner. But I'd never actually thought that they could affect you that way. I'm going to have to look into that.
I remember reading an article on it somewhere, and a friend did tell me about it. Well, I can't factual that is, but it seems to help, I think.
Well, you hear that, everyone? Purple lights. People try it out and let me know if it works. Because if that does work, I want a light for sleepiness, okay? Someone post it to me. Maybe I can get the witch to fall asleep with it. Just saying. Might help. So, what inspired you to write the 3 books you've written?
Really, it would be Terry Pratchett's novels. I've always liked the way he's basically criticized history through his books, and I thought I could really do that in a way as well, and bring a universe that fits our current world, sizes it in a way, is humorous and is fun, but at the same time has dark aspects. Just really things aren't as simple as
So, do you base any of your characters on real life people? Don't worry, you don't have to answer that if it's embarrassing.
I did in there because he's actually a comical person.
Sorry, what was that?
I threw my nephew in there into the book just because he's a comical person. I have hinted on being historical figures, but I haven't outright said it because a lot of them are hundreds of years old and stuff like that. The Vampire King, who's like 10,000 years on, he's been like, he was Dracula. That story got changed and was this guy, and he was little bits here and there, but it's only hinted on. So really read into it, you'll pick it up. But if you're not interested, you'll just glance at it.
Interesting. So, can you give, without giving too much away, because of course we don't want to know the entire plot, can you give us a few little hints as what's in it? What's it about?
So, there's a major conspiracy after the fallout of a blue moon affected every supernatural in a certain way. Magical. After that blue moon, the whole supernatural world's in a bit of a dizzy, and a secret sect of necromancers have taken to disrupt the secret organization that keeps that world hidden, humans, and the books are really the battle between the status quo, those that are trying to disrupt them. So you get the leaders of the werewolves, the leaders of the vampires, which is where all trained order while things are just going haywire because of those secret little necromancers.
Sounds really interesting. Really does. So
it's a difficult one to write up.
Sounds it. And I'm going to have to pause again.
Yep.
So, with all of that kind of mixed in together, are there any hints you might be able to give us as to some little things that might happen?
So there's a good few fight scenes and full of torture scenes. A lot of drama. I can't on things without touching onto.
Okay. We'll stop there then on that question. Don't want you giving it all away. Do you intend to write any other books then? Do you have any other books in the works at the moment?
I do.
Is it about me?
So there will be. I'll let you design your own character. I actually have character sheets that giving out in competitions in the future.
Well, let me know when you do that, and I will happily put the competition in this podcast for any of our listeners to participate. Anyway, carry on, sorry.
Sorry. I actually forgot the question.
Do you intend to write any other books? What other books have you got in the works at the moment?
Yes. So I've got all of books that are within the same universe, but are standalones in their own right. So there's, which is about a young orphan boy in Naples who he is capable of witchcraft, and because discovering a strength that manages to speak to him in his dreams.
I'm sorry, I'm losing you a little bit again.
So,
it's this curse, it's interfering with the internet.
Yes, it's that crafty.
So you were talking about a little boy in Naples, and it just kind of started going all over the place.
Oh, okay. So I a series about this young orphan boy living in Naples. Obviously, he's capable of witchcraft and strange rat that can speak to his dreams. He learns, ends up fighting the mafia, I believe. I'm not sure if I'm doing that yet, but I also have the 6 Hour Outbreak, which will be the alchemist developed a zombie mentally trying to cure vampires from any necromantic spell, and contingent of specials have to stop. There'll be a different number of an intelligent zombie. There'll be your baby, your folly, that kind of thing. I haven't a handful of books. I think I'm going to do a time travel one as well. Got a few that I've started.
I swear to God, there must be something wrong with this episode because so many interferences, and now like this. I'm sorry, you've just been cutting in and out, and I didn't want to interrupt because I was trying to work out what you were saying. Oh God. And now for the big important question. After all, this is the first episode of October, and it is all things ghosts. Are you a believer?
I don't believe in ghosts. That make me feel like ghosts may actually exist.
So, have you ever had like any paranormal, I guess, experience that you can't explain logically?
Yes. So the house I grew up in, that none of us could sleep in, and there was five of us, and no one could sleep in it except brother, my the middle son, I'd say he is. Red room because it had red wall, but also because you get to sleep in there, and you just had a state of panic whenever you cut off. It wasn't right, and you'd hear noises. I was young, so petrified, and I'm probably just telling someone died in that room or something. I don't, but it's what, like, when I think about that god awful room.
Well, Well, I've got to say, I think I'm in a similar boat because I'm not sure whether or not to believe in ghosts, but I've had experiences I've never been able to explain. So, what do you think happens when we die then?
Well, a believer and that energy transfer. I believe that hopefully our consciousness is an energy that will transfer into some type of ether. We stay conscious and we don't completely go into the dark void. That's my hope. Our consciousness will transfer some form of energy which will continue to live out.
It is a big hope. I think a lot of people have. But to be fair, it could also be a case of our energy just transfers into a new body, giving it new life, and that is why we have fragments of memories that are from quote-unquote past lives. Just sometimes those memories may be stronger than others, and that's why they pass on. You never know. Just a theory, just a thought. But then I'm also that person I was going to say, I'm also that person that thinks that God is, well, if there is a God, because I don't really believe in a God, but if there was a hypothetical God, I believe that would be a woman. So, just saying.
I believe that God is an all.
What's that, sorry?
I believe that.
I still didn't catch that.
Oh.
Try again? Third time charm?
Yeah, I believe that God and he's just trying to entertain people.
Either you said God is a clown or God is an asshole.
A writer. So pretty much between.
I
say that right as a writer.
See, the reason I think that God could potentially be a woman if God does exist is because of one simple thing in the Bible. Now, Christians go on about how God made man in his image, but God can bring life into the world. He can create new life. If man is created in the image of God, then wouldn't man be able to birth children and not women?
That's a good idea.
Because women are creating life, nurturing it and bringing it into the world, just as God did to create the world. Therefore, wouldn't God be a woman and wouldn't women be made in God's image?
But would a woman really such a messy state?
Sorry. Would a woman leave the world in such a messy state? I don't know. Have you seen some women? There was
I don't think.
Story time. There was a girl I knew, right, and her house was like entering a pigsty. Literally, atomic bomb had hit the ground, exploded, everything was everywhere, debris, the lot, and the house had just been plonked on top. That is what the house was like inside. Okay, that was what the house was like. So yes, I think a woman may leave the world in such a messy state. Just might have felt that way inclined that day. But no, it is a very valid point. I am that person that, of course, being trapped here, I have way too much time to think on these things, and I actually did hypothesize that God is a woman if God exists. Because as well, I've got an extra rib.
I just think women managing things than men, so pretty let the world get to the way it is. In a couple of days.
But yeah, so do you believe then that well, as I always say when looking at true accounts, always take everything with a huge mountainous pinch of salt. But do you believe that some of the stories that have been published, not so much Amityville, because we all know that was fake, but some of the other more well-known stories could have actually been hauntings? Real, genuine hauntings.
I'd like not... I would very much like not to, but there are so many unexplained within this world that, yeah, probably some could. I mean, if you think about it, everything is possible. So why not? You know, if it proves that they didn't happen, then maybe they did. And that's petrifying, but ghosts could exist, and
I'd have to agree with you. I would rather not believe that any of them are real, because the idea of being in the shower and having someone just stood there watching you and you can't see them is terrifying. I don't know why that idea is more terrifying than any other aspect of ghosts, but it is.
I used to suffer from sleep. Like, wake up at night, not be able to move, and I'd see over me but yeah, that was, yeah.
I've had sleep paralysis once.
Stems from,
and it was nowhere near as scary as the idea of someone watching me in the shower.
Wrote a poem about it. Hey, hasn't happened in a very, very long time, so
and pause. So, without getting too personal, like, how often were you having sleep paralysis, and what was the scariest thing you saw?
Just that it was just this faceless woman. I guess that's might have been a man, but and just floating above me, and inch until I managed to say something or make a noise. Minutes, and it happened every night. Ask me how long, but it was long enough to jump.
Wow. Kind of sounds like the bent neck lady from what was that?
What was it? Haunting of a House.
Yeah, Haunting of something. It's on Netflix.
Yeah, that messed me up for a good.
It does though, because of the way you're on about. She hovered over you, and the way she hovered over that girl immediately came to mind the bent neck lady, and that scene of her laid on the sofa with this bent neck lady staring back at her, screaming.
I mean,
I guess that would terrify me, if I'm going to be honest. Probably more than the idea of something looking at you in the shower while being invisible. If I saw that.
Something actually being there.
If ghosts are about, don't you fucking dare do that to me. I will hurt you. Maybe dead, but I will find a way to hurt you. Sorry, just had to put a warning out. I am in the Cursed Kingdom after all. So, do you know of any other paranormal experiences that you've not been able to explain whether it's happened to you or someone you know? What scares you most about them?
Been a few instances where like what do you call it? Off a wall during a certain time and it freaked everyone. Coincidence. I don't believe in those things because I make myself not believe in them, because if I do believe in them, my imagination will run wild and then next thing you know I don't sleep for a month.
I think that's a big thing about writers is, well, any artist, you have such a big imagination that if you let yourself believe something like that, that's it. Your imagination is just going to run wild with you and you're going to have nightmares far worse than anything you would have ever seen on TV. Unless you get to my point where I actually had, whenever I watch something scary, I have nightmares, but I actually enjoy them because they're fully fleshed out stories.
Yeah, I really well written, and I have to thank, but still not worth it.
See, I had a nightmare after watching The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix because I binge watched it, and I actually enjoyed my nightmare because it, even though the story wasn't like out of the series, it was a completely different story that my imagination had decided to come up with while I was asleep and just roll with it. It was a fully fleshed out narrative. And I was pissed off when my mum woke me up. Like, my mum comes in and...
Those ones that you think...
My mum woke me up and she was like, "You've got to wake up. You're crying in your sleep, sweetheart. Just wake up." And I'm like, "Mum, piss off. I was enjoying that because I wanted to know what happened next." I know it was scary. I was probably screaming my head off, but I wanted to know genuinely who murdered this chick.
No, when I have those nightmares, I cartoons until I have to go to work.
Yeah.
Sleep.
I get them often enough, and they're like fully fleshed out narratives, and you're just like, you are the main character in the story, like, but you want to know what's gonna happen. You want your questions answering, but your brain always refuses to give you the freaking satisfaction.
You can never go back in.
No, and you end up like with so many unanswered questions. I mean, I still have unanswered questions about that nightmare. Like, who the hell murdered the chick that was haunting my house? Why was the murderer setting paper on fire in my hand? And the demonic laugh, was that the murderer? Who was it? Why did he do it? Not fair.
No, not at all. Sounds like fun.
That is the worst nightmare, is when your brain refuses to let you finish it. That's just my opinion. I'm sticking to it. So, thank you so much for joining us in the Kingdom of the Damned. I'm sorry about all the technical difficulties we've had. I swear this episode is cursed. And thus I am going to give up because I'm pretty sure it's cursed. It's because it's about ghosts, isn't it? The ghosts are going to come back and get me. Just to be warned, with it being the beginning of October, the horrors of this cursed land have started to emerge, and that's why I'm pretty convinced this is the haunted podcast episode. So, I fear it will not be long before the dead emerge from their graves after this. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen next by this point. So, safe travels, my friend.
I'll be looking out for any undead.
I do apologise for all the technical difficulties that occurred during that interview. It's the first time that I've ever had such difficulties and I can't understand it at all. But alas, they happened, and of course I will look at them and find ways of resolving them for future reference. Thank you for listening to that, and now to our next segment, our terrifying short stories. And here we are yet again for the short story segment. I hope you have your crucifixes at the ready, and if you don't, I suggest that you do, because we are about to delve into something terrifying. Our first story was submitted by CD's ArtandWriting. You should check them out. They're on Facebook and WhatsApp and have a whole array of short stories for you to read and enjoy. So, let us begin. Tonight is October the 3rd, and it marks the anniversary of the grim events in Ho Ho Kus, which few people believe, especially in other towns. It marks the event of a strange, unsolved murder by a strange, unsolved man, Duja the Reaper. The story goes that an 11-year-old boy, Ignatius Pont, was taking a walk by the train station. He walked over the railroad tracks, then stopped midway to listen to the loudspeaker overhead. Without lights and without warning, the level crossing came down, quicker than ever before. Ignatius heard a train whistle blow, and he saw to his right a massive train unnervingly close. He ran as fast as he could towards the level crossing, planning to jump over it when he tripped and fell. His last moments were most likely him standing up, looking directly at the train. Ignatius Pont's body was never found, and people around here are greatly wary around the train station, especially at night. But I'm not afraid. Today, I was planning to take an evening walk up the stairs to Ridgewood. The stairs were right behind the train station. I would have to cross the railroad to get there and back. I greatly doubted that anything would happen to me. I was 14, a fine age to go out on my own. Ignatius was probably frolicking around and didn't notice the train coming. I was much more mature than that. The train station was in front of me. The air was crisp and fall leaves fell to the ground as I walked across the tracks. Regardless, there was still an air of sinister. There was no body, which was impossible. I started on the steps. While the evening grew slightly darker, suddenly I heard whispering. Reaper. I shook my head. The wind, obviously. See, Reaper. Come and see. I continued to walk up the stairs. I looked to my left, then to my right. On my right appeared to be a scythe. I looked towards the road once more, and when I looked back, the scythe was gone. My journey continued, and then I reached the top of the stairs. I walked down to the left, now in a more towny area with houses, the sky darker than before. Then I heard something. Dirt being shovelled. Not too loudly, but somewhat loudly. I looked everywhere. There was no one and no shovel to be seen. Get a hold of yourself, Mariana. I wouldn't be worrying if it wasn't the anniversary. I continued to walk, and just when I turned to come back from the end of the block, I saw another scythe right of a bush from a house. I turned back around, and when I looked back, the scythe was gone. The journey back felt much shorter. It was now approaching the darkness of night. When I began to descend down the stairs, I heard the wind again. The scythe. The kill of Dodger Reaper. One some more. It felt like I moved quickly down the stairs. Finally, I approached the tracks again, and the sky was now an absolute black, blacker than pitch. I walked across the tracks, looking both ways, especially the right way. I continued to walk, and then the level crossing came down. A train whistle bellowed deafeningly loud. To my right was a massive train approaching. Horror-struck, I turned and left and ran down the track, the train on my tail, and on the back of the train was a shovel, a scythe, and a mangled bodies of Ignatius, Pont, and Maiana. Well, that was truly terrifying, though it was short. I do fear for the poor soul that encountered such a tragic end. I hope your grip upon your crucifix is tightened as we prepare for our next horrifying story. And now for something perhaps even more terrifying. A scary, sort of nursery rhyme that may just leave you with nightmares. Empath by Kev Doe. It was a cold spring night, warm as light, when two new parents beheld a most beautiful sight. A baby girl with golden curls, they named her Amy, and she was their world. 4 years passed by, the time seemed to fly, as they cherished every moment with the apple of their eye. Those first few years were full of fear, and every now and again a flood of tears. But as time went on, and with each new dawn, they grew more confident, and no longer fawned. Then came a day after which nothing was the same, for they brought home a puppy and sparked a tiny flame. They named the dog Shell, and it was easy to tell that Amy loved her puppy with each and every cell. They were having a blast, but it wouldn't last. They didn't know it yet, but the good times had passed. Soon after her arrival, they noticed something strange. Whatever mood Shell was in, Amy's was the same. "How cute are they?" her mother would say. "I really do hope it stays this way." Then one day, Amy burst into tears and clamped her hands over her ears. She was sitting in school and became overwhelmed with fear, though the reason why was not exactly clear. "I don't know what happened," said Amy's teacher with a sigh. She started to cry, and there was terror in her eyes. Amy's poor mother had seen this before after she scolded the dog for peeing on the floor. "Bad dog, get out!" she'd cried, in a moment of rage that would soon subside. For at that very moment came from outside the piercing screech of Amy's cries. At the speed of light her mother took flight, and in garden found Amy, shivering with fright. But Amy couldn't say what had gotten her that way. She told her mother, "All I wanted to do was play." "Amy's just sensitive," she said in a hurry, and left the classroom, her head in a flurry. She was now more sure than ever before that her little girl, there was something more. By 10 years old, Amy's spirits had grown cold. It was a tragic sight for her parents to behold. Her mood swings were wild, and she no longer smiled or held inside the innocence of a child. Nights full of terror and days full of tears plagued the one they loved and held most dear. "I'm not really sure what this could be," said every doctor they went to see. "We'll try her on these, 1 twice a day. Then come back in a week. What do you say?" A box of pills to cure her ills, but the drugs did nothing, and she struggled still. From every doctor it was the same report, until finally they decided to try a last resort. "Your daughter has a gift, just like me," said the psychic medium they went to see. "But never before have I seen one so strong, and in this world she'll struggle to belong. I feel your despair as if it were my own. As soon as you walked in, my heart let out a groan. There are many like us, with powers weak and strong. We feel the emotions of others, as if they were our own. That is the gift, your sadness is mine. Between it and a curse lays a thin line. Her power is strong, but there's more to see. She's an empath, yes, but she doesn't feel me. The medium paused, looked in the young girl's eyes, said, "Oh God, no, she'll be terrorized. I'm so sorry, I should have known it's the emotions of animals she feels as her own. All these years, everything you've seen is the pain of animals through which she has been." The medium tried her best to make them see that of this gift, Amy would never be free. But they left unconvinced and didn't yet see just how bad the impact of Amy's gift would be. Puberty hit Amy like a 10-ton truck as her tortured emotions began to run amok. With each passing day, Amy's powers grew as her parents watched in horror with nothing they could do. The fear, anxiety and pain of animals far and wide, whose constant suffering she felt deep inside. "There's so much cruelty, misery and fear, I can feel it all, they scream in my ear." She couldn't sleep and never thought to eat. Her mind was on the verge of absolute defeat. Drugs, alcohol, self-inflicted pain was some of the things she used to distract her brain. But there was no relief, no moments of peace, just a flood of emotion that would never cease. It was grim spring day when Amy's parents found a letter in which their daughter told them things will never get any better. They called for Amy and searched all around, but their poor young daughter was nowhere to be found. Agonizing hours came and went as they sat and waited, hearts tightly clenched. Until finally, late that night, came a knock on the door and a dreadful fright. They ran and answered, only to find Amy standing there with 2 police officers behind. "We found your daughter. She's not doing very well. It's a good thing we got there before she fell." They embraced the daughter, looked in her eyes, told her they loved her and let out joyful cries. "I'm so sorry," she said and pulled away, "but I need to find peace and this is the only way." It was in that moment her parents realized their beautiful daughter would need to be institutionalized. Aged 17, Amy sits alone, tired, sad, and far from home. The doctors and nurses are nice as can be, but nothing they can do will set Amy free. It's her birthday today, another year gone. Through each day of pain, she's forced to hang on. But something changed earlier that day, and she felt it inside and it wouldn't go away. Then came a voice from outside her room. It called to Amy, a nurse she presumed. "Happy birthday, Amy. We've got you a surprise, and we're pretty sure you won't believe your eyes." The door creaked open, and for the first time in years, Amy's eyes were filled with joyful tears. Shell came running, breaking free from her lead, jumped into Amy's arms, so excited she could barely breathe. And in that moment, all the pain disappeared, the screams were silenced, and Amy's mind became clear. Shell was so happy to see her lost friend. Her absolute delight brought Amy's pain to an end. She wriggled in her arms and licked her face. Amy never wanted to leave that loving embrace. But the respite was brief, for the visit had to end. Shell was dragged away, and the horror started again. I hope that little nursery rhyme brought chills to your spine, as it did me. And I apologise for the snoring, for beside me lays my dog, though you can't see. And now on to our next creepy tale that will bring you goosebumps, I'm sure. It will not fail. Our final short story for this evening is Mona by Geraldine Rice. "Explain again why we're at Mona's place?" Leo Enfield asked. "I still don't get it." He took another pull from his coffee, hoping his stomach would settle. "Del, what did you put in there?" Carl asked, pulling into the gravel driveway. 2 shots of KO, 1 of JB. Wendell opened his eyes, and this time the inside of the cruiser didn't spin. Wendell eased out of the passenger seat of the cruiser. Carl slipped out from behind the wheel and draped his lanky frame over the roof of the car, and then sighed at the other deputy. "Will you pull that out already? Hold up!" Wendell tipped the cup upside down and guzzled the rest of the concoction. Last night had not been good. It was a year today since Mary left, and he had wanted to be unconscious for the whole 24-hour period. He had failed at that too. He tossed the empty cup into the street and let out a belch. Much better. "Let's roll. You didn't grow up around here, so you wouldn't know. I'll give you the short version." The 2 deputies shut their doors and began walking to the porch, day-old snow crunching underfoot. The last 8 generations of Elcoll's women killed the man of the house, all of them on Halloween after their 40th birthday. Wendell snorted. "Oh, come on! Are we out here on the strength of some old wives' tale?" Carl gave him a look. "No. Documented fact. I was a little kid when Mona's mother took a hot frying pan and went upside her boyfriend's head. My daddy was one of the deputies called to the house, and he saw with his own eyes what she did to him. Flattened the back of his skull." Wendell only shook his head as they climbed the porch steps. "All we need to do is go in, check everything from top to bottom, and make our way over to the party by 9. I suggest you spend the time getting that which you should not have drunk last night off your breath." "Yeah, I got some mints in the car." Carl swung open the rickety screen door and knocked. "Sure is cold," Wendell said. "Can't remember the last time we got snow this early." "Yeah, the weather ain't the only thing strange around this time of year. You'll learn that quick if you stick around long enough." Carl knocked again. "Come on, I know you're home, Mona. You never go nowhere." There was a heavy footstep from somewhere inside. Both men cocked their heads and listened. Eventually came another, then another, as if the person were building up momentum. The footfall stopped behind the door. After several clicks and slides of locks, Mona's front door creaked open a slither. "Evening, Sheriff?" They could see part of her face, but she stood mostly behind the door. "Now, Mona, you know I'm not the sheriff," Carl said. "I'm only a deputy." Carl put his hat in his hands and fumbled with the edges. "That humility act looks water-thin from in here. I'm just sitting down to supper. What do you boys want?" "I'll shoot you straight, Mona. Everybody in town knows what's gone on in this house in years prior. I ain't saying that includes you, but you did turn 40 back in January, and well, I'd like to give you proper opportunity to prove everyone wrong. Shoot me straight?" Mona's eyes was locked on Carl. "How long did you practice that speech, Sheriff?" "I don't know what you mean." Carl looked nervous. "Elections next year, Sheriff. Besides, what do I care about proving everyone wrong? Everybody can eat a log as far as I care." Carl shoved his foot into the wedge of the doorway before Mona could shut it. "Now, Mona, you know we're coming in there. Foregone conclusion, if you don't have anything to hide, then you don't have a problem with me coming in." Mona had an almost scared look. Wendell couldn't see Carl's face. His wide back was to him. "You can't just barge into people's houses. I know my amendments. I ain't done nothing illegal." "Well, there's illegal, and then there's illegal. Who's to say Wendell and me didn't hear someone's in distress? It'd be our duty to come inside." Carl looked over his shoulder at Wendell, the chill in his eye, more so than the cold biting Wendell's ears, had a sobering effect. He shifted his feet, tapping his pinky on the side of something in his pocket. "You mean the town drunk in training? My reputation in this town is spotless. I ain't even had so much as a parking ticket. Not when it comes to this, Mona, and you know it. All anybody will say is the police came out to her place and she wouldn't let 'em in. Why? Everyone will ask. They all know what your mama did, and her mama, so on and so forth, like that. You're already guilty by virtue of your last name. Carl stepped back, his thumbs in his belt, flexing his skinny arms like wings on some giant flightless bird. Wendell guessed he was right, proud of himself. Mona dropped her head and said something under her breath. She shut her door and slid the chain off. Come on, and let's get this finished. I was just eating my supper. She walked out of view. You're really running for sheriff next year? Wendell asked. Shush up with that. Carl craned his neck like he was checking to see if she'd heard. He crossed the threshold and waved the other deputy after him. It was dark inside once Wendell shut the door. They could barely see save for the light leaking around the shut kitchen door. They both bumped into things, and Wendell stumbled over what felt musky and small, almost knocking Carl over. Watch it, will you? Hey, Miss Mona? Could we get a light? Miss Mona? A naked bulb clicked on with Mona standing underneath holding the string. Wendell yelped at the harsh face staring at him. The angry twisted mouth, her giant dark brown eyes like two stones dropped into a barren field. If she tried, she might be halfway good looking, he thought, when his heart finally slowed. I suppose we can start in the kitchen. I can finish while you snoop around. No, Carl said. No. How about we start upstairs? I suppose. Mona rolled her eyes. The stairs squeaked. Wendell thought he might collapse through and wind up somewhere in the basement, but they held under his bulk. He caught a glimpse of Mona's backside swaying back and forth in front of Carl on the way up the stairs. Nice. She turned on the light at the top of the stairs, and her body silhouetted. Why, she's much too fine a woman to be wearing that, he thought. Wendell found himself bumping into Carl again. Sorry, I slipped. Carl didn't say anything, but turned away to Mona and held out an arm for her to lead the way. I only got the 2 bedrooms up here. The bedroom's all tore to hell. I've been washing up in the kitchen sink. Wendell wouldn't have minded seeing that. He wiped his sweaty brow on his hairy forearm. As cold as it was outside, it was roasting up here. You got your heating on? Mona looked at him as if he'd just walked in. No, heat's broke. I've been using the kerosene heater. Can you keep it together for 10 minutes even? Carl's sarcasm was rearing its ugly head again. Sure, Wendell was a screw-up. He'd been a cop over in Lynchburg, but he'd had to get the hell out of the Dodge. He was lucky enough that the last sheriff in Harvest Hill was his cousin, and still had some pull. But Mary hadn't come with him. That didn't mean that Carl could just push him around. He'd been doing this for all of 2 weeks that Wendell had been there. He had a mind to march up to the sheriff and let him know the stunts he'd been up to, getting FaceTime with folk like the election was next week, making copies of his flyers a little bit at a time. Del, you coming? His face went hot. Wendell hated being called that. He had a craving for the sip in his pocket, but wouldn't give Carl the satisfaction. Hell, who was he kidding? Busting Carl would be great, but it would take too much work. In truth, he might just consider his uncle's offer to come manage his gas station up in Ohio. Then he'd be in charge of something. The first bedroom was hardly that. A naked mattress on the floor, stuffed into a corner, half covered with clothes, bedsheets nailed up over the windows, a dresser ready to fall over any minute against the far wall, and a flat-screen television directly hanging on the wall. Light came up through a hole in the middle of the floor, big enough for them to stumble over. Nice TV, Wendell said. I try to keep the place nice. The 2 deputies tossed stuff around on the floor, and Wendell's tried to sneak into her underwear drawer. He wondered if he could get away with a quick sniff check. I don't think so. Mona slapped his hand when he grabbed the handle to the drawer. I doubt a body could fit in there. It's all right, Del, Carl said. Know-it-all bastard, Wendell thought. Just trying to be sure is all, he said. No harm meant. Mona gave him an evil stare, but he found himself thinking how cute she was with her nose all wrinkled up like that. We done in here? My supper's getting cold. Mona stormed out of the room. Wendell smiled at Carl. What the hell's wrong with your face? That Mona, he whispered. She's a number, ain't she? Carl did a double take. Mona? He looked almost ill saying her name. You still drunk? What? Females ain't your type? The human ones are. Carl followed her to the other bedroom, with Wendell not far behind, shaking his head. It was even smaller, messier, and had no mattress or television. Carl took kicking piles of clothes as Mona stood in the doorway watching. Wendell sifted through his piles, careful not to react to the thick corn chip smell from massive amounts of socks. He rose once they were both done and smiled at her, but she gave him the finger. Saucy, he said, this time not under his breath. Carl looked at him, but didn't say anything. What's in here? Carl asked. Nothing. Just the bedroom. Told you, it don't work. Carl tried turning the handle, but the door was jammed. Open it. There ain't nothing in there. Ain't you got hearing in them big ears? Fine, I'll open it. No! Mona put herself between Carl and the door, knocking his hand away. Mona, move. You can search anywhere else you like, just not in here. Well, what if there's the only place I want to look? Look, I invited you in. If I had something to hide, why would I do that? I'm getting in there one way or another. Now move. No! Carl, why don't you lay off? Wendell started. Shut up, Del. Mona looked at the other man. No, I ain't gonna shut up. Wendell thought this as good an opportunity as any to impress her. She was watching him now with those pretty eyes. He took a deep breath, hoping his chest puffed out a bit more than his gut, and put a hand on Carl's forearm. The lady said she don't want you in there. It's her house, now you better respect that. Mona cocked her head at him, looking confused. Carl smirked, turning toward him. I better, huh? The two men held their positions a moment, as if waiting for the other to make a move. Wendell felt the air in his lungs sinking like twin anvils. He blinked, but didn't dare do anything more. If Carl hit him in the belly, he would throw up all over him. The other man expelled a long breath through his nose, deflating some. Hell, who cares? He said. This night's been too long already. He turned to Mona. Come on, let's go on downstairs. She looked at both men and then slid away from the door. Wendell was feeling satisfied with himself, hoping Mona realized that was from his doing. When Carl ducked down, planted his outside foot and rammed his shoulder into the door, springing it open. What? Wendell managed to say, tottering behind the quicker man. He clenched his jingling stomach and a burp squeezed out, just in time for Mona to run into the gut-rot cloud he'd just expelled. They turned into the dark threshold to see Carl's silhouette, stumbling to and fro. Mona flicked on the light. It was even more of a mess in here. The semi-tiled floor was tinged yellow, the grout overgrown with filth. What tiles there were on the wall were cracked. The sink was half missing and filthy, the shower caked in dirt, although there was half a bar of soap in the corner of the tub. Wendell couldn't look at the toilet without his weak stomach doing a hula. He took a step back when the smell hit him. The look Mona gave him stung. Well, thanks for embarrassing a lady, Sheriff, she said, and folded her arms. Wendell liked how that accentuated her cleavage. Carl looked around a moment longer, as if the dead body or murder weapon would pop out. Wendell was disgusted with him. All right, Carl began. It's all clear in here. He sauntered out. I'll send my cousin over to fix the door, if you like. I don't think even Da Vinci could do anything with the rest. He laughed at his dumb joke and narrowed his eyes at Wendell's little shake of the head. They went back downstairs. In the kitchen, Mona had nothing out of the ordinary either. A paper plate on the table had some kind of meat with a gravy sauce and onions over a bed of rice. Looks delicious, Wendell said. Is this the basement? Carl asked, walking over to the door at the far wall. Yeah? Mona's voice seemed so small to Wendell. He suddenly felt angry with Carl. He turned away from Mona. It was hard to look at her that way. I'm gonna check it out. I'm coming, Wendell said. Nah, you stay up here. Keep an eye on things. The bastard opened the door and went down, not even bothering to look at either one of them. You okay? He put a hand on her shoulder and gave a gentle squeeze. Beneath that, he could tell her skin was very soft. Wendell wanted to put his hands on her soft parts. What are you doing? The sad expression evaporated into a sour face. She shrugged Wendell's hand off her shoulder and picked up her paper plate. There was a pot full of that meat on the stove, and she scooped a healthy spoonful on top of what she already had. Despite the unsettled liquid contents on his stomach, Wendell's mouth watered. Well, do you want some or what? She said. Wendell looked at her. If you don't mind. Grab a plate then. She gestured to the stack of paper plates and plasticware just behind him on the counter. Maybe he was wearing her down finally. Wendell thumbed up 4 plates, splitting them into 2 sets of 2. Think Cranky could have some? He tipped his head to the basement. He doesn't deserve any, but I guess. Don't just stand there. This is self-serving. She sat with her back to him and began eating. Wendell put a few spoonfuls onto each plate. He caught a whiff as he stood over the pot. It smelled good enough, but not like anything he'd ever eaten before. He wouldn't be rude and ask her what it was, though. Maybe some kind of beef stew. Carl came up just before he took a bite. What is that? Mona made it. Fool, you don't eat suspect food. Suspect of what? You didn't find anything in the basement, did you? Carl made a face. No. See? You made all this fuss over nothing. She really was just sitting down to supper, and we could be at the party right now. Yeah, we could. Let's get. Hold on a sec. Don't you have something to say? Wendell felt bold again. Like what? Like I'm sorry? You've been a royal pain since we stepped in here, treating this lady like she'd done something wrong. Even breaking her door, and you can't even apologise? Carl was silent. Hell, she even made you a plate too. Wendell held it up. I ain't eating that. Probably came out the toilet upstairs. So you mean to tell me you're gonna be the deputy who ransacks innocent people's houses, who in turn try to make nice with you by offering you food you refuse to eat, Sheriff? I'm sure some of the ladies around here don't take kindly to food being turned away. That last part seemed too smart. Carl stiffened up. Alright, but I ain't apologising. He took the plate and fork from Wendell and speared the meat, dragging it up to his mouth and biting off a hunk. Wendell used his knife and fork, cut off a small piece and popped it in his mouth. Mona had turned in her chair, still chewing, as she watched the 2 men eat. Wendell winked at her, and she actually smiled back at him. It's a little gamey, Carl said, around a mouthful. Never in a million years would admit it, but Wendell agreed. It was really chewy and stringy too. The 2 men stood there, chomping for what seemed like forever. Finally, Carl swallowed. Well, that was truly repugnant. Carl's voice was a whisper. I think I will go to my car and holler at the bushes. Wendell tried to ignore the tickling on the way down after he swallowed. The feeling remained even when the meat got to his stomach. He knew he wouldn't hold this down, but Mona would never be able to tell by the smile on his face. "Come on, Dal, let's get." Carl slapped his hat back on his head and cocked it a bit before heading for the door. He paused just before leaving the kitchen and shivered. A long, high-pitched fart came out and Mona pitched back in her chair, laughing and clapping her hands. "The meat," Carl began. "What did you put in it?" "Nothing you won't have to study about in the next 20 minutes or so. Something I ran over, I don't know." Carl fell to his knees. "I was going to pack it up and hand it out to the kiddies tonight, but this'll do instead." Carl fell on his face, and his hat popped off his head. "Is that going to happen to me?" Wendell asked. Mona turned to him. "Hell yes." "But I love you." Mona pulled a confused face. "No you don't, you idiot. I must have done something wrong." She stood up and went to the Lazy Susan with all her seasonings. She grabbed a small container with no label, filled with tiny green leafy things. "I must have used too much of this stuff." Wendell felt numb from the waist down. He couldn't believe someone he cared about would do such a thing. "But I still feel alright." "That's 'cause I put the thing on you." Mona made a downward V with her index and middle finger. Wendell shook his head, confused. "You know, a hex or whatever?" "I don't know what you call it. I sprinkled this over your head when you first came in. You got just as much time as him, but you won't feel it till you drop over." "That love thing must be some kind of side effect." "It ain't. I love you. I really do." "Aww." Mona walked over and patted his cheek. She took the plate of food off his hands and set it on the counter. "I need you to take him down to the basement, dig a hole, and bury him. Hurry up while he's still alive." Wendell looked over at Carl on the floor. Carl was twitching, and from what Wendell could see of his face, he was frothing at the mouth. "What about when I'm done?" Mona pursed her lips. "You're right. Dig a hole big enough for two." Before she could walk away, Wendell latched onto her neck with both hands and squeezed. He wanted to do what she told him, but he couldn't help himself. Dead or alive, they should be together forever. Mona's eyes bugged, and she scratched at his wrists. His head felt hot and swimmy, and he started burping in her face. "What have you been eating?" she retched out. He could feel his strength waning, his hands sliding down until they fell limp by his sides. He doubled over with cramps and began passing gas before he fell headfirst onto the floor. Wendell wished he could have taken her with him, but it was just too much work. And that is the end of this week's short story segment. I hope you enjoyed all three very different variants of short stories, from the nursery rhyme to the very short story at the beginning to this final one by Geraldine Rice. And just a reminder that if you enjoyed listening to me narrate these short stories, or any of the content in this podcast, then press that like button and press that subscribe button with that little bell so that you receive notifications of all future episodes. And I am really sorry about background noise, but my dog is snoring at the moment, so... and I can't exactly stop him snoring. He's a loud dog. So as promised last month, I believe it was the episode at the beginning of September, one of them anyway, I promised you guys a bit of a spooky story, a very paranormal story, that may even involve myself. And here it is. On the first Friday of October, let us delve into the darkness of the unknown and unseen. So, let us begin by reading a story that is supposed to be true from someone who contacted me based off one of my ads in a Facebook group. I was 16 and we had recently moved into a new house, so my mum had been looking for furniture as I didn't want my old bed in my room. I was into fitness and needed something to lay on that was much smaller. I had checked out a couple of places around town, but no luck. I went into school shortly after. I was getting my GED, and on my lunch break, I had walked by a local store called Dancing Moon. I was always attracted to the vibe of the store, so I stepped in kind of frequently. I decided to stop in, and a woman who worked there, she seemed to be in her 60s, and while I was looking around, she stopped me. She told me she wasn't meaning to be forward, but she'd sensed something about me, and that I should protect myself. She gave me a small amount of sage and told me that I needed to go home and burn it in my room. I didn't have the money for it, but she insisted I needed it and gave me some. Anyway, I felt so odd that I left after that. I went back to school and then headed home. My mum was there, unloading the couch, and I remember just feeling so happy with it. Mum said it was an older 70s couch, and she'd gotten it for a good deal at the local thrift shop. She knew I'd want it. The next few nights went well, but like a week into having the couch, I did my evening workouts and thought I would lay down and watch some TV. Next thing I remember, I woke up and I heard something with a raspy voice say my name. I looked around and the only thing I noticed was my TV had like a snow screen going, so I knew my channel must have changed. It took me hours to fall asleep. The next night, I did my workout and turned off my light, turned my TV on, and my closet began to move. I kinda scooted back as far as I could on the couch. I couldn't think of anything else. I was scared, and my closet opened and out came this scary looking girl thing. It had black eyes, a long crack down its face, a sharp toothed smile, long black straight hair, and what looked like a plain white hospital gown. It crawled out and came all the way to the couch, looked at me and smiled, and then went back into the closet and slammed the door. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I messaged my girlfriend who stayed on the phone with me most of the night. Things became more frequent after that. I began to see her every night. She continued to crawl for a while, and then my niece came over. She was 2, and she meant the world to me, so we were pretty close. My girlfriend had also come over that evening because she knew I'd been so scared and she wanted to be there for me. That evening, I went to my niece to sleep and my girlfriend, my niece and I were laying there and my closet slowly opened. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. My niece began to say, She, there's a monster in the closet. She said it several times and I looked down to the bottom of the layout part of the couch and said, Leave her alone! As soon as I said it, the thing reached out and scratched from my knee to my ankle, then left us alone for the night. I was so scared. I began to think I needed to do something about it, but I didn't know where to begin. I started to Google local mediums or priests, etc., but any medium I messaged would swear I had something demonic attached, and they couldn't help. I found one in Rayleigh who said they could help, but they never could seem to come close to my location. Over time, things got more violent, and one night I had a dream about a man who wrecked into my home. In this dream, he knew my sister, who knew his intentions. He had kidnapped my family and was a cannibal. I was unable to stop him from hurting my family and myself, and when I dreamed he bit me, I woke up. I felt a severe pain in my arm, and when I looked at it, it was a demon face imprinted on my arm. I ran to my mum immediately, and she just freaked out. She didn't know what to do. She told me I just needed to pray. I did, but it wouldn't leave me alone. My girlfriend and I were having trouble around that time and ended up breaking up. Within the next week, I had woke up with a huge wet spot on my floor. I got my mum and explained, but the water heater, etc. was fine. The spot was like someone had just poured a gallon of water on the floor. A few hours later, it was still there. So my mum went in the room and began to pray and said that whatever was there needed to leave immediately. She would not continue to allow it in her home. And I don't know why, but I dropped to the floor. I was so sad. I felt like my whole world had ended and began to sob uncontrollably. Once I left the room, I was fine. I didn't understand. After a few months, I went back to Dancing Moon and was looking for books, anything I thought that would help me get rid of this. And the same woman was there, and she said she remembered me, but I seemed different. So I told her what had happened, and she reminded me of the sage. And told me I should use it and tell the thing to leave me alone, to go into the light. So I tried that, but with no luck. After dealing with this for almost a year, I met a guy and we started dating. I warned him before he came over that I was pretty sure I was cursed at that point, but he said it was fine. He would be okay over time. I realised if he stayed the night, it wouldn't bother me. And I told him. One night he asked about my couch and I explained to him how I had gotten it, etc. And he asked when the things happening to me had started, and we had put together it was around the time we got the couch. He explains it to me and my mother, who's reluctant to just get rid of it randomly, but she saw what I had dealt with over time and decided to let him throw it out. The first few nights after it was gone, I still heard noises and scratching, etc., but did not see that thing anymore. And by the weekend, when we got it taken off to the dump, it was gone altogether. I couldn't believe something so terrifying and evil could have been attached to something like a bed or a couch, or that it could have been so terrifying. I was just glad it was gone. I spent months after worrying if I would have to deal with it ever again, or see it, but I luckily never did. So, that's the end of the first part of the story, but now I'm going to scare you that little bit more. You see, 2 weeks before I started posting about doing my paranormal special for Halloween, I'd had a pretty terrifying nightmare. Now, those that know me personally would know that whenever I have a nightmare or a general dream, I generally use it as inspiration, I guess, for novels, film scripts for short films, radio scripts. So, in my own words, based of what I wrote in my notes for a potential short film script, I will read to you what I saw in my nightmare. The doors burst open to reveal a demonic version of herself, dressed in a white robe, much like a hospital gown, and a deep crack down one side of her face, and eyes as black as oil. She staggers back with wide eyes as the demon steps out of the closet. Pretty creepy how both descriptions match the same. We found it creepy at the time too, when I was interviewing the person who had this unfortunate experience occur in their lives. I thought it was quite a bit of a creepy twist to a tale. So, as promised, I shared with you all a pretty creepy little experience of my own while I was conducting the research for this episode of The Cursed Kingdom. I'm going to let you kind of ponder on it, make up your own theories. Is it just coincidence? Or is it possible that it was the supernatural? Is it just coincidence? Or could it actually be the paranormal? I'm going to let you decide, and comment down below what you think. I'd love to hear what ideas you guys come up with. And now on to our next apparent true account. Though as always, you should look at everything that you read or hear with skepticism, because we never know the truth. Only the person who posts it does. The year was 1994. I was 5, so the first time I met my ghost would be in November before Thanksgiving. It was just my parents, my little brother, and I in a 2-bedroom house. It was dusk, not quite dark, and back then, on that little street, most of our neighbours were good friends with each other. My brother and I happened to have been playing outside while my parents were just across the street, standing outside with our neighbours. All of a sudden, a neighbour from down the way appeared, running down the sidewalk towards us, shouting, "It's on fire! There's a fire!" Just as soon as he got to us, we could see the pillars of black smoke curling in the air, and then came the sirens of the local fire department, police and ambulances. By then, most of our street was now poking their heads outside, and a group of them, including my parents, decided to walk down the 4 blocks to the scene. My mum was carrying my brother and I was skipping along, keeping up. When we reached the 3rd block, there was another group of bystanders watching as a building was going up in flames across the way. Fast forward a few minutes later, I somehow got separated from my parents and my brother. Mind you, by now it's getting darker, and the streetlights were coming on. I looked for them, but amongst the crowd of onlookers, I couldn't find them. That's when I felt someone looking at me, and I swear to this day he called my name. I didn't know anyone. My instincts told me to go home, just start walking, and I did. This masculine entity I kept sensing was with me the entire way. I guess, in a way, just like a dog following his kid to the bus stop from afar, hoping not to get caught. Anyway, I ended up at my house and the street was empty. I walked right in through the front door, closed it, and called out for my parents, but was met with silence and my chow chow bruiser. Me and my dog ended up sitting on the sofa by a window that looked into the street. I could see my neighbour's front porch perfectly. And when I looked, I thought I saw the boogeyman standing there, looking at me. I remember getting scared fast and even my dog started to growl. But there came that feeling of being watched, not from the boogeyman, but from my guide. I looked again despite almost peeing myself, and the figure was gone. Within minutes, my parents were home and we had a tearful reunion. Fast forward 10 years, I'm 15, and up until then I had completely forgotten about my experience. I'm with my best friend and her parents, her brother and his best friend, on the way to Busch Gardens. At one point, our road trip led us to crossing over on a ferry boat. This was during October, my birth month. Busch Gardens had Oktoberfest, and as a birthday present, my parents paid my way to go with my BFF. So, we were the last ride to VA on the ferry that night. Car troubles had us off schedule. Me and my BFF decided to get out the car and stretch our legs and snuck upstairs to the little cabin area. While we were up there, I felt him again. I asked my friend if she felt anything weird, to which she said no and laughed, and said that I was just being paranoid. I laughed with her, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that we were being watched. We heard the bell signalling us that it was time to get back to our cars because we were close to docking. She went ahead of me because I had to tie my shoe. As I was heading down the stairs and out of the corner of my eye, I spotted movement, and quickly looked. I didn't see much of him, because he moved so quickly and quietly it was almost as if he weren't physical at all. He had long, dark curls and was dressed in all black. Black jeans, boots, jacket. He was gone just as fast as he was there, and we just so happened to be the first car off. And I didn't see him get off the ferry. But I remember the weird feeling I got before, and it reminded me of before when I was 5. Maybe I was paranoid, I thought. Anyway, how could the same guy from 10 years ago be there now? I left it to my imagination. Days later, we're on our way out of a Walmart. Her mum was getting the bags and paying, so to kill 5 minutes, we decided to play some of the games. There was this one claw machine in particular that held jewellery, and I found a necklace I really liked. It was short, black cord necklace with a gothic cross pendant. I spent $5 trying to win it, and lost every time, and I couldn't spend any more money. My friend was busy trying to win a stuffed animal. Her back kind of turned from me, and this guy walks right up to the machine I'm standing at. I didn't look at him, really. I saw him in the reflection of the machine, though, and I just knew it was the same guy from the ferry. Dark hair, dark clothes, same odd, unfamiliar, familiar feeling. He asked what I was after, and I pointed my prize out. He then stuck a crisp $1 into the game, and I swear he didn't even touch the stick and won the necklace. By then, my friend was standing beside me. Her face said it all, shocked. The guy gave me the necklace, and as I turned to hand him $1 back, he was gone. She said he was just gone. She didn't even see him leave. We ran out into the car park, and there was no one fitting his description. My last encounter with him was when I was 25. See the pattern here? By then, I'm married, and we have a 5-year-old. Her grandparents were taking her for the weekend. It was a Friday night. My husband and his twin brother were off doing their gaming thing in a town over. I'm home alone, except for our 2 dogs. I decide to throw in a movie and call it a night. It's dark, the movie is playing, and I'm half asleep when my dog Gypsy starts growling. I heard something or someone knocking around the back door. It's almost 10 p.m. My first thought was it was a burglar. Both dogs jump from the couch and keep staring at the back hall. An uneasy feeling crept over me, and when Gypsy barked, the sounds stopped. I grabbed a bat and yelled as loud as I could, "I'm home, and I have a weapon and 2 dogs ready to eat you." Both dogs then take off down the hall, barking and growling. I see the figure of someone running past the window, away from my house. I was freaking out by then and texted my husband to come home. As my dog started to settle, I heard as clear as day, "You're safe." I knew it was him, my guardian guy of mystery. The feeling I get when I sensed him from years before was the exact same each time. I've never felt what I felt with anything else. I happened to be wearing that necklace that night. And here's where it starts including me. 2-ish weeks ago, you made the post about your podcast, and it made me think of my experience when I was 5. I ended up talking to my mum about it because I wanted to find out any information I could about that night. I didn't find out much. The local news stations didn't have anything they could help me with either. I came to a dead end until my mum remembered an old family friend who still lived in that area, born and raised. My mum said if anyone remembered that night, it would be her. I found her number and gave her a call. It actually took a few calls to reach her, but finally I got my answer. That night, almost 25 years ago, an elderly woman was leaving her house with her grandson. There was a gas leak and the house exploded. She and her grandson survived with minor injuries, but there was a death. The boy who died had a bad rep. He came from a bad family. The lady I spoke with said he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. She said if he didn't wear all black all of the time and had some friends, he wouldn't be seen as a bad kid. I haven't sensed him since I was 25, but I still have the necklace. When I first read that, I thought it was kind of a nice story, as well as a bit creepy because obviously, if it's true, she's being followed around by some strange young lad who's looking out for her. Not all ghost stories are sinister, though the majority of those that we hear are. So here is where I'm going to end my part of this segment, with another little story, also related to this podcast and during its production. So, after the first strange experience during the production of this particular episode, I was talking to a friend about it. We've all met her, Gina Ruby. She made our awesome intro, and she also starred in one of the interviews. That's how I got to know her, and I'd say she's pretty awesome. Anyway, it was still pretty fresh. I just recorded my ghostly encounter on here, and I was talking to her about it afterwards over the phone because she was the only person awake at that time because it was an ungodly hour. Anyway, as I'm talking to her, suddenly I feel this pressure on my thigh, like a child's handprint. And I mean, I know what a child's handprint feels like. I've got a son, okay? I'm pretty used to it. Of course, me being the skeptic that I am, my immediate thought is that, well, I'm just having a phantom sensation. I mean, when you've been pregnant, you get phantom kicks. Why can't you get phantom sensations in the night? And the whole sensation was most probably brought about by the power of suggestion, or at least that's what I thought at the time. So I didn't mention it to her at the time. And I can't remember exactly because this is a few weeks ago now. I have been working on this episode as I've been working on other episodes, just so that I can get everything done in advance with research and stuff. But she mentioned something about my son, like, shouldn't I be getting him off to bed, getting him back to bed or something like that, bearing in mind it's an ungodly hour at night. My response is that he is still in bed because that's exactly where he was. He hadn't got out of his bed, he wasn't crying, nothing. Then she tells me that she's heard a child blowing raspberries down the microphone as I've been talking, and she thought that my son was playing and generally messing about like toddlers do. So that was another little creepy experience that I thought I'd share with you all. Now I'm going to temporarily leave you in the company of Bella, a psychic medium, and her story of the haunting and the paranormal phenomenon. I hope you enjoy, and please do not hold back in giving your opinions, any logical explanations you can provide, any theories you've got. They're all welcome in the comment section below, and I would love to hear them. As I keep saying, I like to remain skeptical, but also open-minded. So I like to look for logical explanations, but I'm also open-minded to the idea that there may not actually be one. Anyway, now I will definitely leave you. with Bella and her story. So, enjoy.
So, talking about my first encounter started about age 3 that I was truly afraid, and I really remember it very well. Let's light some candles for atmosphere, actually. Just, I like a white candle, makes me feel safe. Talking about this stuff kind of, you relive it. Yeah, there we go. So I got some candles lit now. All right. So, my first memory was of a porcelain doll crawling up my bed sheets, up onto my bed, and trying to grab my feet. Yeah, porcelain dolls should not be able to move like that, ever. So, honestly, yes, it was possessed, because I could see a demon controlling it. Like, I was very in tune with my abilities at a young age, which is normal for any sensitive. The younger we are, the more in tune we are. And when we hit puberty, we kind of close up and shut down because of all the hormones. That's perfectly normal. But that porcelain doll wasn't the only doll that did that. So my mom burned the first doll, which actually came from New Orleans, from a hoodoo shop. So not surprised at all that it was demonized. But anyway, after that, my mom also gave me a different porcelain doll that was next to it for a while, but it didn't seem affected at first. It was just the one doll that was acting out at first, and in detail, I would describe it as like a circus performer doll, like an old-timey circus, though. Like, she had on like striped pantaloons and like a funny hat and things like that. But just the tiny cold hands climbing up and grabbing my feet just still scares me. I'm scared that when my children become old enough to have dolls, I'll still be scared of dolls. Even Barbie dolls bother me. Anyway, after that, the second porcelain doll did the same thing, except it would wave and say hi. Like, I would hear hi and my name a lot. And it scared me so bad I didn't sleep in my own room for about 6 years. No, 7 years. Yeah. It wasn't until I was 7 years old that I could sleep in my room without freaking out. So, anyway, after that, my mom burned the second doll as well, or she broke it, or something like that. And she got rid of the dolls in my room. But then, like, people would give me dolls as presents, like Barbies and stuff, and Barbie cars and things that would make noise, especially since I had a younger sister and she was getting all these noisy toys because of her age, because she was born when I was 4, so she was really young too. She doesn't remember a lot, but she does believe in it. Like, she did witness enough that she believes in it. Anyway, I ended up packing up anything that resembled any dolls and any toys, because otherwise they would make noise all night. I would hear shuffling in my closet. At first, I put everything in my closet thinking, oh, the closet will keep me safe. If I could keep everything in there that I know for sure is not going to open and come out. Well, maybe it didn't open and come out, but it still made a heck of a lot of noise. Like, I would hear shuffling in the closet. I would hear random beeping noises from the car, the little car keys that went with the Barbie car. My sister's baby toys would make squeaking noises and things like that. And it was just undeniable evidence. So when I was about 12, 13, I got all of the toys that made noises or resembled dolls out of the house. And we no longer accepted gifts from like my grandmother at that point because of that. Because a lot of the toys and stuff were being sent by my grandma, and my mom was really confused over what to think about it. So anyway, this demon entity, it followed me all my life. I didn't actually see it and feel it gone until quite recently when I did a cutting cord ceremony. A cord cutting ceremony is what it's called. And it removes all attachments to any kind of entity or spirit. Sorry about my phone, it makes a lot of noises. But anyway, it just kind of hung around for my entire life, and it was just like this brooding presence. And a couple years ago, it got real bad. Like, I would feel it breathing on my neck. It would give me horror movie type dreams, and it would make me feel chased all the time. It did that really my whole life when I think about it. I had night terrors and screamed and all the time. But part of that, I think, is being a medium and being able to like ascertain where these dreams are coming from was very hard for me at the time. And another thing about the demon is, like, you could always sense it no matter how closed off you were to the spirit world. So, like, I would see him in a corner. Unless you were, like, really, really, really closed-minded about demons existing, you wouldn't have been able to sense. You would have been able to sense it unless you were. But yeah, anyway, a couple years ago, I did a meditation to connect with my spirit guides, and I actually witnessed two angels come rush from the window behind me through the room, grab the demon, and push him back outside. And he kind of stayed outside for the last couple of years until I did the cord cutting ceremony. But I mean, I was happy to have him outside, you know, just as long as he wasn't breathing on my neck and giving me night terrors all the time. I was happy. Besides that, as a young girl, I had what they would call imaginary friends. But I wouldn't call them that. They were shadow people, for sure. They were malicious, and they would put me down. They would make me feel bad about myself. Of course, they were my only friends at that age because I felt so alone and lost and closed off from everybody because I also have autism. So I went through that as a child, and they were my only friends. I called them Sarah and Michael. They appeared, most of the time, they appeared healthy when I was very young. But as I got older, the more obvious it was that they were either dead people or shadow people acting like dead people. And I could see cords going from the demon to them. So I knew that they were being controlled by the demon. But at the same time, they were my only friends, so I didn't know really what to do about it, and I didn't really know how to think about it without sounding crazy or talk about it with my parents. So my parents just decided they were my imaginary friends. And it was like that till I was about 10. And then I started trying to ignore them. And the more I tried to ignore them, the more things that they would try to get me to do. If you climb up this tree and get all the way to the top and jump down on the ground, we'll show you something like you've never seen before. Things like that. Or, one time when I was like 6, they said, if you lick that electric socket over there, I'll give you a present. And hint, hint, the present is filled with candy and Princess Belle stickers, you know, from Disney. And that was my favorite character. I would do anything for a Disney coloring book with Belle, the Beauty and the Beast star, and my nickname was Belle, so I really related to her, so they knew how to get me to do shit. But, the more I tried to ignore them, the more malicious they got. They would, grab my feet and try to pull me off the bed, and they would knock me off the bed, roll me off the bed in my sleep, and I would hit my head most of the time on something. And so I suffered a lot of illnesses and injuries as a child because I could not fight all of that off. And I didn't know how. I didn't know how to talk about it. But today I'm convinced there were shadow people because I have come across other entities that are known as shadow people. And I kind of made a connect the dots decision that, yeah, I was plagued by shadow people when I was a kid. So, there's those. And like I said, I had that demon my whole life, basically, until just recently. And it's a weight off my mind not to have it around anymore, and not to be fearful for my future children having to grow up like that. Anyway, those are just a couple of the experiences that I've gone through. Also, I have seen in other people's houses, I've seen shadow figures, of course. I've seen one of my friends, or my aunt's husband's spirit guides, and he was like a warrior Indian spirit guide. He's really cool though. But every time I come towards him, he stamps his staff on the ground with a heavy thud, and you can just tell he doesn't like me because I encourage communication about spirits, and I don't know why he doesn't like me. Probably I do stuff, or I practice witchcraft. I am a Wiccan, so maybe it's that he doesn't like about me. Who knows? I'm not really sure. I can't read another spirit guide's mind without its permission. So, anyway, also I do investigations. I've come across what I would call portals or doorways, but they look more orb-like. But they're very large and dark, and usually I relate those to aliens, and unfortunately there isn't a way to fight off that kind of thing right now that is known for sure to work. Like gopher dust might work once, tar water might work the next time, black salt the next time, and then you're out of options. And they come for you anyway. And it's not like you can just move and get rid of them. That's not how it works. They'll follow you because they're attracted to you for a reason. If aliens come after you, they're attracted to you for a reason. And it's like being a guinea pig, from what I understand, and it's a tough life. But some people just have to live with it their whole lives, and unfortunately there isn't much known about the paranormal. Nothing to prove that a certain thing works for them. But also I've come across small entities in my house that are shadow entities or lower level demons. My bunny even played with one. It looked like maybe an armadillo, sort of, except it was pitch black, shiny scales, and it had really pointed ears, I remember, and yellow eyes, and kind of a bat-like nose not like an armadillo, but similar to one, I guess. It didn't have a tail, but it had spiky scales on its back. And at first I thought it was just, a shadow of my bunny, but then I saw my bunny running after it. And I was like, okay, so that happened. And what I did was a banishing spell for that one. Also, I had to do a recent cleansing, banishing, and closing of all portals in my house. There were like 3 portals in my house. There were spirits coming through the windows, through the mirrors, and there was a spirit in my closet of a woman, a really crazy woman. She stayed in my house about 7 months. At first, she came to me. Her hair was straight up like she was hanging upside down, but she wasn't. And she was levitating off of the floor, like a foot off the floor. And she was wearing this dirty-ass nightgown. And she had dirty feet, dirty toenails, dirty fingernails, but they were bloody under her fingers, so it looked like she had scratched bricks. And generally that's what she did, was she would shuffle around in the closet, and when she was irritated she'd throw shoes out of the closet. So I kept the closet door closed all the time, because I was too caring, too loving towards her, and she felt like this was her home. But it wasn't. It was somewhere near her, where her kids used to live. And then I found out later that she actually murdered her children and ended up in a local insane asylum called McBray. Now, the way she acted after I figured this information out, like the way she normally acted was like she'd squat down on the floor and like she'd be against the wall like this, scratching the wall constantly, like all the freaking time. And it was annoying. It was so annoying. I act like she's still around, but she's not. She's gone, and she can't come back. But anyway, that was my experience with her. I've had so many experiences, it's hard to pick out a handful for you. But I really, really hope this video helped you. If you have any questions, please ask them. I'll probably end up sharing with you more videos and more experiences. I'm happy to share them, happy to document them for you. And also, I am an eclectic Wiccan, so I do practice witchcraft. But the great thing about that is I know how to get rid of some types of entities, many types of entities actually. So please contact me if you ever need help.
I do apologise that this episode was a little bit later than usual. I had a lot of technical difficulties and a lot of problems, and I hope in the future that I'll be able to tackle these problems a lot better than I did this time. Doing this is always a learning curve, and it's about learning from what's happened in the past, I guess. I mean, I've spent a lot of time the past month and a half, 2 months, creating this podcast, and I love doing it for you guys. I do hope that you enjoyed this week's ghostly special. Are ghosts real? Do you believe? Don't you believe? Please do let me know, and let me know any thoughts that you have and what you think the cause of the strange activity that occurred while I was producing this video was. So, don't forget to subscribe as well if you are looking forward to some more spooky content, as we have loads planned this month. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week.